Great. Well, you are here hopefully for the Expeditionary Pacific sea kayaking trip. My name is Lainey. I use she, her pronouns. I am the current wilderness program director here at Camp Manitowish. I started last January, so just over a year ago now. Loved last summer, learned a ton, really got ingrained in the Manitowish community, and it made me really excited to be a part of someplace new. My background, kind of learned to love the outdoors at age 8 when I was in a summer camp in Michigan. I was lucky enough to kind of progress into seasonal roles that allowed me to be a backcountry canoeing and hiking guide for children and adults from the Detroit area. So had a really great experience with that. Loved it so much so that I wanted to kind of stay on as full-time staff at my home camp in Michigan. So I was there for a few years before migrating to Manitowish. And that's kind of how I got here and where I'm at. So I'll hand it over to Kenzie.
Cool. Thanks, Lainey. So I'm Kenzie. I am the Outpost Director this 2022 season. I'm from Colorado, but found my way back to camp originally in 2009. Was a camper and Outpost participant for a long time there, and then started working on staff in 2017. And I've got to work in a lot of different capacities here, from summer camp to leadership. I was a sectional, and last summer got to lead a pretty neat trip canoeing up in Alaska.
Awesome.
Cool. So the fun stuff, getting kind of into the trip, the overview, what it looks like, and some of the fun details for your upcoming summer. So the way the beginning of the experience works is you all show up to camp, and that's when you really get to start the group building and bonding process. You get to build that community with the whole group and the leaders all in one place, which is super neat and something you've all probably experienced being here in past years. You have that group facilitation day, which is led by our leadership staff. That's just, again, more team building, and it's a really neat day doing these facilitation activities. Could be on the low ropes course and the high ropes course, which is a really cool opportunity before you get to head out into the wilderness together. More of just that pack out, double checking your food, looking over the menu. A lot of your food will actually already be shipped to Alaska by the time you get up here, because you will have 2 resupplies via float plane during your trip. So that's going to be already on its way traveling up north by the time you arrive, but you'll get a look over that last bit of food that's packed out, go over the menu, and then go over all your gear, pack it out, test everything, make sure it's all looking good before you head up there. And then you have the time to hone in on those technical skills. You have what's called a shakedown day, so you get to get on the water. Lots of time to practice all the safety stuff, rescues, wet exits, paddling techniques and skills, those group rescues, group travel methods. Hopefully we get a little adverse weather so you can get some wind, maybe some rain on Boulder Lake. It's not quite the same as an ocean, but we can hope that'll give you experience in some different conditions, and assure your sea kayaking skills are at a comfortable place before you get to travel up to Alaska, which is also a super, in my opinion, fun process. On June 24th, you will bus to Minneapolis with the Alaskan backpacking trip. And from Minneapolis, you'll be flying to Seattle and then all the way to Juneau. And once you land in Juneau, you've got a few nights to spend at the Mendenhall campground there. You'll have time to organize gear, get any last minute supplies, white gas, bear spray, things like that, or other little things like fishing licenses, if that's something that you are interested in. And after your little Juneau explorations and gear gathering extravaganza, you get a shuttle on over to the Eagle Valley Center, which houses our kayaks and our gear. We do not schlep our kayaks all the way with us to Alaska, as fun as that would be. So that's run by a really great group of folks up there who let us stay on the lawn the night before, which you all will be doing, and kind of prep and stage all of our gear on their property. So you'll launch from there, and you'll also be paddling back into there. So that kind of serves as our camp hub up in Juneau, which is really neat. And we've really enjoyed working with them in the past. So we're excited to pay them another visit this summer. And once you leave that cool place, you enter into another really cool place, which is the Inside Passage, where you'll be spending the next 40 some days paddling. So you start in Juneau, obviously, and then you move down south through the Inside Passage, spending time in various protected waters and different sounds within the passage. The passage kind of starts more protected and a little bit smaller, and it gets bigger as you move south, which gives you good time to practice and get more comfortable before you get into that bigger water, being on the ocean. And this trip is super unique in that a lot of our other trips often center around scarcity and simplicity, but this one is all about abundance, abundance of wildlife, water, weather, people, everything, just about everything you can imagine, which is really neat. And it requires you to be on your game and aware of your surroundings all the time. You've become very in tune with time, working with the tides. You've become very aware of the animals and the terrain around you, and it's a really cool experience to be immersed in this terrain in this area. A typical day, groups will go roughly 8 to 15 miles a day. It can be a lot less or even quite a bit longer. And that's just because you're at the whim of the weather and the tides up there. So you're kind of working with what you've got and trying not to fight that too much. So you have time to learn how to be in tune with all that and take it day to day while you're out there. And throughout the trip, you'll receive those 2 resupplies of food via float plane, all arranged ahead of time. So those pilots will come in, drop off the food, take some trash, and send you on your way, which is really fun. A fun way to get your food on a 45-day expedition. So some things that are different than previous trips you may have been on, the weather. It's pretty wet up in Alaska on the Inside Passage. You're paddling next to glaciers and near snow melts and snow runoff. So it's usually an average of 60 degrees with mist or rain pretty constantly. But this can vary anywhere from 30 and rainy overnight to 80 degrees and sunny the next day. So we say be ready for wet and cold, but be prepared for anything. Because you never know what Alaska is going to give you. The water, another super unique aspect of this trip that's unlike any of the other trips that we send out, is its ocean, and you are at the whim of the ocean tides. So you have a really cool opportunity to learn how to read the tides and then work with them, hopefully spending less time fighting them and more time working with them throughout your adventure. And you have a chance to get in this rhythm of the tides and working with that on a daily basis. So you are more in tune with time on this trip and what that looks like in your daily schedules, which is really neat. Given that you are on an ocean and on the salt water, everywhere that you camp will have a freshwater source. And we are the campsites at this one tend to be more set on the route, given these water sources and our permitting with the Tongass National Forest up there. So it is a pretty predetermined route to assure that you are following fresh water supplies, carrying that with you throughout the day. So that will never be of concern. And then the wildlife. The wildlife is certainly different than any other trip you will see sent out with camp. Welcome to the whale watching expo. You will see so many whales, among other things, jellyfish, bears, black and grizzly, dolphins, sea lion, otters, river and sea, seals, starfish, birds, eagles, salmon, clams, you name it, and it's probably there in Alaska, and you'll probably see it, which is super, super cool. It's an incredible thing, and the stories we hear from groups coming back every year just continue to amaze me. And another really neat thing, your trip will be paddling and staying on Admiralty Island, which is the largest concentration of grizzly and black bears in the world together. That's not really a concern for us bothering us because they're so well fed with the salmon runs and the berries. So they usually leave people alone. And we do take great care to prepare for bear safety. We are visitors in the wildlife's home, so we have a lot of precautions and protocols surrounding how we travel in these areas. Everyone will be carrying their own bear spray and is trained at camp on what to do if an encounter were to ever happen. But yeah, we have these many precautionary procedures and how we set up camp, store food, and so on to make this an enjoyable experience and to respect the wildlife that was there before us. And then another thing worth mentioning and should be taken seriously is the re-entry after a trip like this. Coming back from 40+ days in the wilderness can be a really difficult transition. It's something I've struggled with, and I know many people have struggled with, and it may not always get easier with time, even if you've been on an extended trip before. So it's something to just take note of. It can be overstimulating and overwhelming. And you can still be shocked when coming back to the front country. It's a lot that you aren't experiencing while you're out there in the back country. So just a reminder to parents and to participants to remember that this is a challenging experience and to be gentle with yourselves and your family when you return. I know it can be frustrating for parents if your kid leaves for 6 weeks on this incredible adventure and then they come back and they're more aloof and cold-shouldered and not ecstatic to see you maybe right away. But this is something that is very common, and it just takes time and intentional communication and conversation to kind of readjust. And this is something that we are very intentional with at camp in setting that space for when our trips do return at the end of the summer. Great. The fun stuff, probably big questions on a lot of your minds. So I'm going to try and cover it. And obviously at the end, if you have any questions, you can throw those in the chat, as Lainey said, or ask them at the end of this as well. But the big thing, the dry suit. I know Lainey's been in contact with you all about those big essentials. So you'll be right up next to the glaciers and in this snow melt water. So it's cold. The water's very cold, which is why we send everyone out on this trip with the dry suits. They provide a lot of warmth. They keep you dry, and they also help you float if you are to ever end up in the water, which saves you a lot of energy for swimming. And under those, a lot of leaders and participants in the past have recommended a good base layer and a mid-weight layer, as well as a thin pair of wool socks on the bottom and then neoprene socks on the outside to kind of protect the dry suit and provide that extra layer of warmth. But layers are going to be your best friend under the dry suit and at the campsite during the evenings, and you'll get kind of in this rhythm as you're out there figuring out what system works best for you. Another one of those big ticket items is the neoprene booties. They're very important. Whether you have the ones up to your knees or just those classic kayaking ones, they both work great. A lot of times it's personal preference, but just having those booties while you're paddling during the days and in and out of the kayaks. And then the pogies, those mitts that you ordered that Velcro onto your paddle, they act like little rain jackets for your hands to keep them dry, to keep them warm while you're paddling during the day. Those are great. And they're also a very fashionable accessory when you're out on the water. And then some of the cold, wet weather wear. When it rains, it pours. It gets really wet up there, as I've mentioned before. So rain gear is super important. If you already have a good Gore-Tex raincoat, you don't need another. You don't need to invest in another. But if you are looking to get a new rain set for this trip, we do recommend the crab fisherman style ones from Helly Hansen. Think the bright yellow rain suits you see people wearing on fishing shows. They're a rubberized vinyl type material. They tend to be less expensive than those Gore-Tex, and they're great for keeping water out and for keeping you warm. And the same goes with rain pants. If you have those good Gore-Tex ones, don't worry about investing in a new pair. But if you are looking to, those rubberized fisherman style ones are great. Helly Hansen's just one brand. There are other brands out there that you can find at cheaper prices. And I believe the packing list details some of those with those links as well, which is very helpful resource to look at. And then the dry shoes, rubber boots and Crocs are what leaders and participants have recommended in the past. Crocs or some type of shoe like that to just air out your foot. It's been sitting in a kayak all day. It's good to get that airflow. Just when you get into camp at night, sit down for a minute, let them breathe. And then those rubber boots, a highly recommended brand from past leaders are Extra Toughs, but any rubber boot's gonna work. Find what you like and go with it. If you have muck boots from your previous trip, those are going to work just as well. Just kind of that thick rubber on the bottom to protect on the barnacle and the ground you'll be walking on, and then to keep your feet dry while you're at camp in the evening. And then just that classic dry trail wardrobe, pretty standard. The base layer, mid layer, a fleece layer, puffy jacket. People love puffy jackets. And then a fleece neck gaiter and hat. A lot of people recommend a wet set and a dry set. So 2 neck gaiters, 2 hats, one for paddling and one at camp in the evening, just to keep you dry and warm at all times of the day. And then fleece gloves. A lot of people like to wear fleece gloves and get the dish gloves to put over them. And this is it for the campsite in the evenings. The dish gloves keep your hands dry. They're also a much more costly option, and they're great over a pair of fleece gloves. But a lot of people also opt for that dry mitt, kind of personal preference there. So there's no specific need on that end. And then as goes for sleepwear, a good quality sleeping bag, and a good quality sleeping pad that's going to insulate you from the ground and that won't deflate. It's really important to keep you insulated from the ground. That can often lead to a lot of temperature problems in the evening if your sleeping pad is deflating and you're sleeping on the ground, basically directly. And then sleeping bag liners are highly recommended. They increase the life of your bag and they also add a ton of warmth at night. So just making sure you have that good gear there. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to us too as you go. And your leaders are also going to be phenomenal resources for a lot of these gear questions. They've both been to the Inside Passage. So they're really excited to chat with you about all of this, and they're going to have a lot of the answers that you are looking for specifically. You don't need to go out. So with that being said, and buy all the brand new gear for this trip. A lot of what you have from past trips is going to work for this trip, and you can find those options on the deal websites that are included on the packing list. Following that packing list and asking questions when you have them. And then those optionals and comfort items. It's easy to shove and strap things into a kayak. If you're a canoeer, you may be used to bringing a lot of things. I think you can still bring a good amount, but maybe toned back to a sense, or some people just have things strapped on every little portion of the kayak possible, which I've seen. So that can be things for musicians like ukuleles, guitars, harmonicas. People love to play instruments out there, and they can be pretty fun addition to the backcountry. And then cameras, books, Kindles, journals. We highly recommend journals. It's a really incredible way to document your experience and then go back and look upon that later when you have returned home. So little things like that as the optionals and comfort items. Again, lean into your leaders for these gear questions. They're so knowledgeable and resourceful, and we'll have a ton of answers regarding gear. And then just the pre-camp preparation here, all the things before you arrive to camp. So before your trip, before you're here on property, now's the best time to start thinking about how to prepare for the challenges this trip is going to provide you with, and making sure you're in the right headspace, brain space, and body space. We often all tend to gravitate towards the physical before trips like this. And while that is incredibly important, we also want to emphasize these other areas, the emotional, the mental, and the community aspects of the trip and the challenges those will present while you're out there. It is a long time to be on trail. So thinking about the other things beyond the physical as well. Emotional and mental can go hand in hand often, but the past few years have been tough for a lot of us. COVID's been hard. We've been inside, or we've been going back and forth between normal and what's not normal, or the new definitions of normal maybe. And going out into the wilderness for this period of time is going to give you time to process a lot of these things and to think back on it. So just thinking about how you'll be challenged mentally and emotionally out there, what your best toolkit is to kind of face those emotional and mental challenges, and thinking about now how you can address those when you're out in that setting. And then setting some intentions going into the trip. What do you want to get out of it? How do you want to be challenged? How do you want to overcome some of those challenges? It feels like a lot, but even just thinking about it and putting that intention into it beforehand can go a long way when you're out there. Then right down to the physical. It always feels like the big thing. Everyone wants to be training endurance, really want to push themselves to physically prep for the trip. And with that, we just say, be mindful of your physical limits and take care of yourself as though you're already on trail. We caution going too hard, just because that's when injuries start to happen, or overuse injuries if you're really trying to push yourself before the trip. So some good recommendations for that are gentle endurance activities, things like biking, swimming. Yoga has been highly recommended. That's really great to loosen you up, to also strengthen those muscles. So good endurance activities that also aren't pushing your physical limitations. And then even simple things like Googling or YouTubing strengthening videos for paddling. There are a lot of fun, wacky exercises out there. that can help you build up this strength over time. So if that's something that is on the back of your mind, just little things like that, there are a ton of resources out there that don't require physical exertion to the max before you arrive here. And then just that last little part is community. At the expo level, we have the incredible opportunity to build the community beforehand. You get to build this share space before you even come to camp. So utilizing this communication with your trip mates and your leaders, and use each other as resources. We really encourage you to lean into this communication, to practice it before you're here, so that when you do come to camp and you go out on this trip, you feel more comfortable advocating for yourself and communicating with others out there. And for parents, just a reminder, if you haven't already, to send in that contact info for your participants, or your desired method of contact. So once we have all those, we can have the leader start that communication and answer some of those questions there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kenzie, for all of that really great information. Kind of one last bit of, important preparation to think about is preparing for a really important safety component of technical skills, which is wet exits. So at camp, we really wanted to emphasize this because we know that some of you may not be sea kayakers in the past. So this one skill is very important, and it'll be something that is taught extensively when you're in camp. But we also thought that this might be an appropriate time to kind of lay the groundwork for it, just kind of get the wheels turning, and also give you all an opportunity to reach out to us if this skill is, something you might want more, resources or assistance on before you get here, so we can make sure that you really nail this. So Kenzie, I'll look to you. I'm going to start this video. Hopefully it will play. Oh, interesting. Okay, well, sorry, we cannot play this media object. Okay, maybe we'll just skip this right now and I will send out the video afterwards. So after this webinar, I'll send out a little email just recap. So I will attach the video there. My apologies on that. All right, so I will move on to some other fun things, which are upcoming communications that we have slotted for the next month or two. So the first of which is one that Kenzie already touched on, of ongoing leader and participant chats. So like she said, if you haven't sent in your approval or desired method of communication yet, please be sure to do so that we can get the group connecting with one another. Another important date is April 30th. That's when final payments are due. And you'll also receive reminders about that as well. And then two really important dates: opening day, June 19th, where we will all see your excited faces and we'll be so pumped to welcome you back to camp. And then August 13th will be the closing day. So two other important things that I wanted to mention here is that we will be hosting another round of COVID town halls, much in the same way that we did last year. We're still deciding on when the dates for those will be, but just know that they are coming in the future. And then one last thing is that you should have received an email from Camp Docs when you registered, and that is kind of giving you information about a whole host of things related to your Camp Docs profile, but it's also talking about trip insurance. So I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of explain the importance of trip insurance, and just make you a little bit more aware of like why we encourage it so much. So trip insurance is really beneficial for kind of those unexpected things that we know can happen on these trips. So things like, medical evacuations, illnesses that prevent your participant from even getting to go on the trip or coming out of the trip halfway through. We know that these removals from trip can be a huge bummer, emotionally and mentally, but also financially, they are a huge burden. So in the case of, let's say, we're evacuating your participant out and we have to get a plane to fly out to that person to get them back to a more populated place, that would be something that trip insurance could potentially cover. So we just want folks to be aware that I know that these trips are a big financial commitment, and we also want to make sure that, in the event that something unexpected happens, we want to make sure that you all are in a good position with that. So if you have questions on trip insurance, I would reach out to Camp Docs directly to answer some of those more specific policy questions. But yeah, I can't say enough how much I recommend it, especially at the expeditionary level. All right, the next really fun topic that is definitely worth mentioning is that, in 2022, we are, in a position to hopefully make camp feel a little bit more normal, or, quote unquote normal, in the given time. So just wanted to touch on some of the things that have already been released in our latest updates to our COVID playbook. So some things to think about for pre-camp is that everyone coming into the community should be monitoring for signs and symptoms of COVID. We are requiring that folks are fully vaccinated when they arrive at camp. And what that means is either 1 dose of the J&J or 2 doses of Moderna and Pfizer. There are instances where we will be, you are able to file for an exemption, and that would be for sincere religious belief, or also those biophysical reasons such as an allergy to a component of the vaccine. So if that's something that you're interested in, or something that you feel like you need to talk to us about, I can provide some information for Ben Hoffman, who is our operations director, and he can be your main point of contact for that. Additionally, we'll be asking for a proof of negative PCR test administered 72 hours prior to arrival. So those are some really important pre-camp things to notice. Opening day is going to seem very much like last year in terms of the drive-through drop-off. So parents will not be able to kind of wander around camp. We will really just be kind of intaking participants, saying their goodbyes at the car and then joining their group. Alongside that, housing. Last year, we utilized tents on Smith Village lawns to house participants. This year, we will be moving back into our traditional housing inside Smith cabins. So I know that Tent City was really fun last year, but I know that folks are probably looking forward to getting back inside. So that will be going on this year. Masking will still play a role in terms of our COVID mitigation strategies, and what that will look like is mainly focused in anytime we're interacting with members of the public. So think about on our roadshow when we're getting food from a grocery store, or when we're in the airport, also on any form of public transportation. So, your commercial flights, also any shuttles that you take, those would be some prime times where we would be asking participants and leaders to be masked. And testing is also something that may come into play this summer. At this point, we will only be testing if someone is symptomatic. However, all of these COVID protocols are subject to change as the pandemic is ever changing. So camp will continue to communicate with you as changes are made. And with that kind of leads me into my paddle in / closing day bullet point. I know paddle in and closing day are 2 big questions that we've had come up a few times. Those are 2 things that we're still discussing what those are going to look like. So at this point, I don't have a ton of information to share about those two instances, but as things become more solidified, you will be notified. All right, well, that was a lot. Thank you, hopefully, for bearing with us through all of that really, really important information. But yeah, I'd love to turn it over to you all. I think that Kenzie and I may have touched on the questions that were pre-submitted, but if anyone else has anything, feel free to drop it in the chat, or also unmute yourself and we can chat.
I have one question. This is Sydney's mom. On the COVID vaccinations, so you need to be fully vaccinated, but you don't need to be boosted?
We are following the CDC guideline for what it means to be fully vaccinated. So at this
Okay.
time, the CDC defines fully vaccinated as 1 dose of the J&J or 2 doses of Moderna or Pfizer.
Okay. Is there any chance that that will change? Do you think, or I mean, I suppose it could.
I would say that, our COVID playbook is we respond to, the kind of the environment that we find ourselves
Sure.
in. So
Okay.
I can't speak to, that specific point of if it will change or if it won't change. But all I can tell you is that as things change, it will be communicated.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Great question. What else?
Any questions on gear or anything we went over there?
This is Sydney's mom again. She's probably rolling her eyes. I do have 2 questions, and I believe you answered them, but just for verification. So for the base layers that you were talking about, so Sydney was on the canoe trip, right, last year. So the base layers she had for that, it's similar to this, correct?
Yeah, those will be great. It's that typical base layer that you brought on previous trips. So whatever you had last year, it got cold at night, and if you felt that kept you warm, that's great. And then just layering over that. So yeah, no need to go buy the new stuff. If it's worked for you in the past, then it's likely going to work again if you have the warm layers to go on top.
Sure. And then my last question, as you know, Sydney was canoeing as opposed to, she hasn't done the kayaking before. And and I know you talked about training for that and the video that you're going to send and the training there. Is there, obviously there's no concern, right? For people who've canoed and now transitioning to kayaking, that's not a concern for anybody.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's, you know, the wet exit. So essentially what a wet exit is and what the video would have showed is that, you know, if your kayak were to flip over in the water, we have a spray skirt that kind of keeps the water out of your boat. So a technique that we teach and a safety procedure we teach extensively is, you know, pulling off that spray skirt and kind of removing yourself from the boat if it were underwater. So this is a skill, once again, that we practice a lot in camp. And that is kind of the one of the unique skills that we look for participants to master while they're here. I would say, you know, reading the water, very transferable skill. Paddling, you know, I know it's a different motion, but paddling in general is very transferable. And also those, you know, very unique Manitowish tripping things, you know, like the way we cook, the way we, you know, sing, break out the oars, like all of those things are extremely transferable from her past experiences.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's totally common in the Outpost program for people to jump and try new disciplines. This is the time to do it while you're here, and it's really neat to go on those new experiences. Our leaders are both also very experienced, and like I said, have been to the Inside Passage, which is a huge resource and boat of knowledge in itself, right there. So they'll be prepared and ready and excited to teach all that they can while everyone's at camp here.
Great. Juliana, Scott, any questions on your end?
No questions here.
Great. All right, well, I've done kind of my extended 5 count that we like to do here. So I'll kind of wrap us up. But thanks so much for taking the time and investing your time and, you know, being on the webinar. I think, you know, showing commitment to learning about your trip and kind of getting into the mindset of, hey, it's only a few months away. I think that's super important. So I know Kenzie and I both appreciate you being here. Some things that you can expect from us as a follow-up is that I will be sending out an email with the link to the recording of this. So if I know we were saying a lot of things really fast there, so that if you want to re-watch certain parts of it, you'll have the ability to. Also, like I said, I'll link that video for wet exits. And that way you can watch that and kind of get to know a little bit more about that if that's a newer concept for you. As always, Kenzie and I are here to be resources. Your leaders are also here to be resources. So please reach out to us. It's our job, and we're more than happy to chat with you. It's one of the super exciting parts of this for us. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll also be sending the what to bring list too. So in case you haven't had a chance to look at that, I will also be sending that. So that's all I've got. So Kenzie, any last words from you?
You said everything I was thinking before I even could think it. So yeah, again, we're resources. Reach out to us. This is fun. We love talking about trips and the nitty gritty details of the trips. That's why we're in these positions. So definitely don't hesitate to contact us.
Great. All right. Well, I will end the meeting, but y'all have a good rest of your night. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, no problem. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.